All right, Benton. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about 1984. Okay.
All right.
All right. The first question is: how has 1984 affected your view of our government and its actions?
Well, I think 1984 is a really interesting book just because it was written in 1948 when a lot of new technology was coming out. Even looking at it then, you could see a lot of the fear that the author had. Was George Orwell, right? That George Orwell had about new technology. Now when you look at today, you have computers, cameras everywhere, all this new technology that we see. And it really brings up an interesting idea of how much is our government watching us, and is that right?
Yes, that's a great answer. Question number 2. Can you relate the party to the USSR and how it functioned and displayed itself, like how it built its buildings or how it ran its government?
I suppose when you look at the old Stalinistic type buildings and stuff from old Russia, like when my dad was there and stuff, they're really basically just these block-like structures. I mean, it's pretty much what's described as the offices in the book. But it really is kind of a parallel because he saw the Soviet Union. Like, in a historical standpoint, again, he saw the rise of the Soviet Union. He saw all that stuff going on. Like, his other books, like Animal Farm and stuff, talk about the Soviet Union fairly specifically. It's clear that he is drawing conclusions between the two.
All right, yeah. All right, question number 3. Can you think of a totalitarian government that exists today, and how is it totalitarian?
Today, well, you could probably say North Korea would definitely be a good example of that. Kim Jong-il, basically, he has very little disregard for his people. He surveils them, just like what happens in 1984. He basically spends all of the country's budget on defense and weapons and stuff rather than feeding his own people. They're pretty much starving. But yeah, that would be a good example. Some of the regimes in the Middle East that are being overthrown right now, I don't know. That's what comes to mind.
Yeah. All right. Winston resisted against the party by using sex as a way to protest. In the real world, can you think of other different ways that revolting people has protested against their government?
Ways to protest against the government? Well, I mean, when you think of, like, Henry David Thoreau and his books, like, basically, and Martin Luther King and, like, the letter from Birmingham jail, basically the best ways of protest are to go against that law. Like, Winston does that using sex in 1984, but also just any form of protest against what's supposed to be doing. Like when you look at the civil rights movement in the 60s, like the sit-ins, like they would say there'd be like white-only lunch counters and stuff. They would just go and sit there and just take all the abuse from the other patrons, and just by doing that, they'd show how wrong that system was. So basically, is breaking the unjust laws is the best way of protesting that.
Yeah. All right. Why do you think George Orwell chose to create this book at the time period that he did?
Again, like I said, the historical context. When you look at, it was just after World War II. You had Hitler and the Nazis. You also had the rise of, as we know, as the bloc state, Soviet Union. We had just all these regimes that were clearly focused more on control of the people. And again, with the technology that was coming in, it was easier and easier to control the people and dictate their lives.
Yeah. All right. How can you use pathos, logos, and ethos in analyzing how the party in 1984 functioned?
Oh boy. All right. I think what you're referring to that, I think, isn't pathos invoking an emotional response?
Yes.
Okay. I think with the pathos and stuff, you kind of can identify with Winston and all those characters living the place. Like the way that Orwell uses the descriptions in the book, like the drab buildings and the identical workers and the kind of really kind of sad conditions and stuff that people just seem to just like it's a really sad thing when you see the conditions that are going on there and how people just see it as their regular life.
Yep. What about logos?
I have no idea what that is.
Logic, like
Logic?
The logical view, like maybe like the party on how they're doing
Okay.
this.
Well, I mean, the logical view is, I mean, when you think about this is getting pretty deep in terms of political philosophy, but when you think about controlling the people and stuff, a lot of governments focus completely on this logical approach. Control the people, you control everything. It's often been said that Mussolini and Hitler made the trains run on time. I mean, they did that. They were efficient, but they weren't good to their people.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, it's the kind of logical approach of government.
Yeah, and then ethos, which is like ethics and morals.
Okay. Well, clearly in the 1984 world, ethics and morals are thrown out the window. I mean, it's kind of the full frontal lobotomy concept of morals, where the entire personality of the person's been taken out, individuality has been destroyed. It's just this kind of worker drone mentality. It's like an insect mentality that the people in 1984 live off of.
How has this book changed your view on conspiracies and what you are told by the media?
Well, I'm already kind of a conspiracy theorist. That's one of my interests, my areas of interest. I already kind of believe those. 1984 is kind of a conspiracy idea, because you start thinking, what if this really is happening? I mean, clearly not to the degree as described in 1984, but a lot of people believe that, there are shadow governments, that there really aren't what we see is really what's in control. So it really does lead to that question. And it's the idea of, like, when the Patriot Acts were passed, it's kind of like, are they really watching us? Is there somebody wiretapping my phone? Could I get pulled off to some government facility somewhere if I do something wrong? I mean, it's kind of the whole idea, this kind of paranoia that's created. Am I being watched?
Yeah. And then final question is, the party used telescreens and the secret police and other forms of surveillance to spy on its people. How can you think of any way that our government uses to spy on us, such as the Patriot Act, without our knowledge?
Well, definitely, yeah, what I mentioned with the Patriot Act, wiretaps, we have a bunch of stuff. Like, when you think about, it's not really spying, but when you go to, like, airports and stuff, I know it's, like, for national security and everything, but there's a bunch of issues, like, with the privacy concerns. Like, is it right that you have, like, the big X-ray devices? Is that okay? I mean, is that infringing on somebody's rights to privacy? Another issue with privacy is, like, when you think of stuff like WikiLeaks. Is it the people's right to know things like that, or is that a national security issue? Is that information too dangerous for people to have control of?
Yeah. All right. Those are really good answers, Ben. Thank you for answering these. All right.